interesting about the idea of the magical and the impossible. But when you just show the element of something that may be commonsensical or simple to one person, actually saves a lot of time and effort for somebody else. It just almost makes that sort of exclamation mark or light bulb come on the top of their head and go, oh my God, I didn't realise that. Wow. As with almost the same sort of power and wonder as the magical or the impossible being shown.
The voice you've just heard is that of Lee Baines, historian, platoon leader, educator, and officer of Her Majesty's Royal British Forces. My name is Greg Day. Lee and I wrote a book called The Habits of Great Coaches. In this podcast, we aim to discuss the iceberg statements that underpin each chapter within the book, The Habit of Great Coaches.
And I think this element of a lot of things that we all discuss will be a lot of things that are actually quite simple, but may not have been thought about.
Where we dive deep into what it takes to change behaviour, to lead others, and to accelerate those who are yet to be great leaders through the mistakes that turn you in the opposite direction, or that keep you in the same direction but refocus your perspective from the magical and impossible to the simple and common sense.
And may just go, oh, actually, I didn't think of it that way. So both the impossible and the magical on one side of the spectrum versus the simple but overlooked, which could actually lead to really useful things that and I'm constantly getting them every day, and every day I compliment the person who's giving me that for saying it to me, because it makes me go, I never thought of it like that. Sometimes my mind can be a bit more complicated and higher brow in some aspects than things that really should just be look at things through a more simple prism.
And I agree with you completely. And what that brought to mind with me is that a coach or a leader doesn't necessarily need to be in a job description that includes the word coach or some other title of leader, because as you come across somebody in your workplace who reveals something to you that was perhaps simple but overlooked, that person has just revealed a possibility to you, which means that they've given you information that changes your behavior, which by some definition is actually they've coached you. And if I was to try to come up with a very fancy and delightfully sales pitch-like definition of what a coach is, it's this. A coach is a purveyor of possibility, a purveyor of potential. What you're really doing is you're selling, if you take on a coach's role, you are selling not yourself to that client, but you're selling their potential future selves to themselves. This person in front of you has potential, and you selling that potential back to them, and they buy in.
At the moment that somebody thinks it's impossible, they're right. The only time a coach can work on something is if they make the world into a possible world, and then everything is possible. 50% of a battle is fought is possibility. If you think it's impossible, you're right. It is for you.
Which means
it's impossible.
Which brings into account that perhaps the impossible is only an unimagined possibility. You haven't yet imagined.
Having no choice is just a lack of imagination. I think that's Jean-Luc Picard.
Oh, now we're getting Star Trek-y. See, he must do it. Look, let's get this off the table. Let's look at the elephant in the room to start with. We use the word coach, but we're really talking about leaders. We're talking about people who influence another person professionally or otherwise to enhance them.
And just to also clarify that leader thing. The leader is just somebody who's opened up the path, who's now making, through various means, just getting people to move towards a conclusion, a location, an end state. A leader, people think of leaders in the great scheme of things, but actually, leader can just be the one who's seen it. I know the way out. Follow me, or this is the way, or somebody who is heightened that the wealth of possibilities has been shown. Leader can be anybody. Leader can be a child. It can be somebody who's it can be anybody and everybody who actually has a way out, has a way towards, has a way to complete the thing that you need to complete. And leaders can change in a situation. They can be mixed and matched. A coach and a coachee can move around. Imagine what a coachee can teach a coach, and same detail with a leader. It's this idea, this stratified view and hierarchical view of leadership is actually quite it's archaic. And it's also detrimental sometimes when everyone has a part to play and a piece of ownership of it. They become their own leaders and lead other people by their way of thinking. So it just, leadership is also something that is not really considered as part of roles and people, and then at the detriment of others. It's like, no, everybody can be. Leadership is not a God-given right or a role right or age right or gender right or race right or whatever. It's all, everybody and anybody can be it.
And the hierarchical nature of that description was something that I was thinking about, because it's not a pyramid top down where the leader is the person at the top of the organizational chart. If you flip that upside down, the leader is the person at the bottom of an inverted triangle. He is the one that says, if I fall over, we all fall over. Now, I'm propping you up. I'm here to facilitate you so that we are better. If we're talking about an organizational coach or an organizational leader.
And we're also talking about organizations that are working properly. I mean, that's the big point of this. And we'll talk a lot about this in various other stages of the chapters, is a stagnant or organization is one where people either refuse or are not allowed to take any form of initiative or role, and then suddenly you'll have that walking through treacle or mentalities that can be extremely frustrating, and personalities all coming into play with each other when trying to deal with a task in hand or something that you're trying to accomplish. Not considering the fact that everyone's got a part to play in this, therefore denudes the amount of leaders in the organisation.
The treacle is such a great word, and it reminds me of a metaphor of a herd of stampeding turtles through peanut butter, which is the type of speed that sometimes organisations do move, which can be challenging as a coach or a leader to move that.
My favourite one is the elephant and kicking the elephant up the arse. So it takes if you want to move the elephant by kicking it up its arse when it's sat down, it takes an awful lot of effort to shift it, but it only moves half an inch if you're lucky. And that sometimes is also like dealing with some organisations trying to get something to move in the direction creates a whole lot of effort for very little gain.
And so let's get into the preface of the book. We start off with learning doesn't happen until behaviour changes. And what we're saying there is that I can give you information, I can be a facilitator of data, and I can tell you something that says, hey, if you do this, you'll be better. Now that telling, right, is almost immediately forgotten. And so until that person takes that piece of information and does something different so their behavior changes, until that person does that, they haven't learned. They've only learned when they've decided, oh, with that new information, I'm going to do something differently. And it comes back to an old quote that is sometimes attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but I think there's multiple people that have said it over history time, which is that tell me and I will forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I will learn. And that third element of being involved requires action, and it requires a change in behavior. And I think there's a disclaimer here as an exception. If I give you some information and I say, hey, my background, of course, is in sports performance. And if I said to you, listen, you want to be an improved road cyclist, and if you were to train at 3 times per week at an intensity which is at or above what's called VO2 max, which is the amount of oxygen that you can use to burn fuel without going into a deficit of being able to clear that metabolite. So if you were to train 3 times per week at that intensity or above, you actually get some diminishing returns. So you say, well, okay, so what you're telling me then, coach, is that there is some science behind that. and if I want to be better, I shouldn't do that. And I say, oh, that's what the science will tell us. So you say, okay, I'm suitably informed. I'm going to completely ignore you, and I'm going to train 5 times per week at higher than that intensity. Now, I think you've still learned. You just haven't changed your behavior. And that's what's called an uncoachable person in that circumstance. Because what they've said to you is, I want to be better, but I'm going to choose to do a behavior that will not make me better. And in those kind of circumstances, you say, what the fuck did you ask me here for? You know?
One of the mindset, and this is leading to a mindset mentality word, but of what's the point in having a mind if it doesn't change? You know, might as well have a stone or a rock in there in that case. You cannot learn if your mindset is not open to the fact that this learning is going to change something. And in a military history and military types of areas, this is a fundamental part. And British military history in particular is filled with instances at the beginning of a war where the mindset has not been willing to learn until the enemy has taught you through beating the living bejesus out of you many times, and then has got usually sacking that mentality and bringing a new mentality or promoting new mentality to go, I've got a way of defeating this, and then thinking about it, but taking the lessons. Now, it's always better to take those lessons before the war has started rather than the lessons being presented to you by the enemy. And that's also, that's one of the cases. The enemy has a vote in whatever decision you make on this. And learning and making your organization better and prepared to deal with whatever it is, whether it's a competitive sports pitch or a war, is actually being able to learn about how you're going to compete, whether it's in either sort of situation, without actually becoming this staid, rock-minded mentality, which then leads to lack of learning. And again, has the same as about mentality of, well, what's the point of us doing this? All militaries around the world spend a lot of time on education and training to try to learn lessons, but without the mentality to soak that up and then create a behavior, an organization, a procedure that makes use of that, then the whole thing is pointless.
Your word pointless to finish that phrase is so correct, because I'm pretty sure that coaches and leaders are in the business of change, but they're in the business of outcomes. They're in the business of results. And that's because if you're a leader of a military section, or you are a leader of a sporting organization, or if you are a leader of an individual as a hired coach, you're there because someone has said, I want X or Y. I want a result. I want to defeat our enemy. I want to gain this land. I want to win this tournament. I want to reduce my track time by 0.2 of a second. They're talking about a result. And so if you get a closed mindset, if you go into it with a closed mindset, what you're saying is, I know what the process is to get that result. You better be fucking right, because you'll lose your job, or you'll lose life or ground.
But on that side as well, is that the coach has been brought in for a reason as well. That leader's been brought in for a reason. So that's when you again, and this is part of what we'll be looking at with the book as well, is that relations between the coach and the coachee, the relation between the leader and the led. There is an expectation from the coach. I've been brought in on this because of my expertise. There's an expectation of the coachee going, well, I want to be led in order to get this output and get this to win, to get this desired outcome. But also, there's the frictions and misunderstandings and miscommunications that can happen between the coach and the coachee. There's that frictions of misunderstanding the motivations, the thinking behind it, and the beginning point that we're starting with this is that openness of mind on both parties. That is absolutely vital for any future coach and coachee, leader or led mentality that's moving forward on this, is that therefore opening up the learning of both sides, because you will learn during this relationship on both sides, no matter where the expertise lies.